Hey guys, back with some more Bazaar, and today we are doing a build guide. We're looking at Vanessa's new expansion, From the Shadows, and we're going to be explaining, how some of these items work, and, in what context are we going to be using them, interactions with other items, and things along that line. Okay? So just as a quick reminder, please like, subscribe, drop a comment down below. It helps out the channel a lot. I love the support from you guys, and I love making videos like this. So we'll just kind of move top left to the bottom. There isn't really an order that I have to explain these in. But first we have one of the newer items. We have the Kusarigama. Kusarigama up here. So what this does is when we slow or crit adjacent weapons and this gain a certain amount of damage for the fight. I believe it's 3, 6, and 9 now. It used to be 5, 10, and 15. So, slow, crit. What are we looking for? We're looking at things like Clamorer. We're looking at things like Shot Glasses. We're looking at things like, let's say, Corzena's Crest. There's a lot of good things here, and then obviously a lot of these slow items here have great synergies with a lot of different slow skills. Obviously, we'd love to get trained, but there's no like promises really. Like obviously we can get these things. So obviously lots of slow, lots of crit is where this thrives, and it also thrives with an item like Proboscis, which scales its damage. Well, it does damage on slow procs. So when we think about that, and we can scale the Proboscis's damage using Kusarigama, that's where it really shines, is with something like that. And then we've got skills like Trained as well, which just complements it even more. So, the Oni mask. So similar, it kind of works off of slow and crit, so we're looking at similar sort of stuff. Obviously, we love something like Shock Glasses. We love things that scale our crit, things like Inexonerable, just some basic crit skills as well. And then, the Crest and stuff like that. But what this does here is that when we crit, our burn items gain more burn, and when we slow, we charge this. And the Oni mask does do burn. So it's similar to something like the Anglerfish, except it has that actual burn scaling as well as the burn function. So we're just looking for a slow crit combo, really, with something like this. So then we have, I believe this is the Dart Launcher. I think that's what it's called. So this is a funky one. This is, it has slow and poison and damage procs with 4 ammo. And basically, if it's adjacent to a slow item, it slows. If it's adjacent to a poison item, it poisons. So, what that means is that we have, like, interactions with, items like, let's say, we want a slow item, so it's adjacent to Clamorer, or we put it next to a poison item. I'd say the poison isn't as crucial, because we are going to be using it inside with the expansion a lot, with items like Kusarigama and stuff like that. It works really well adjacent to something like this here, the HUD. I forget what it's called. But yeah, it is a pretty solid item. At Diamond, you get 3 slow procs, and it's a relatively quick item as well. It does have ammo, but I don't think that's a massive limitation since it has 4. You're getting a ton and a ton of slow out of that. So, next expansion item, we have this one here. I believe it's the integrated HUD. It is. So, the item to the right of this has crit chance, and then we also, when we crit with the item to the right, we slow. So it's basically just slow procs. It works off of crit as well, so it obviously synergizes really well with Kusarigama and our Oni mask already. And then, when we want to run, let's say, things like slow Shot Glasses as well, and we already have that scaling, it just boosts our critical chance. So if we want to slap it on a weapon that we just want to double its damage, then obviously it's great in that regard. And then obviously on something relatively quick as well, because we want to be maximizing our slow procs. So that's kind of all there really is to it. It synergizes really well with Kusarigama, with the Oni mask, with the Dart Launcher. And then if we think like some maybe quicker items, like sometimes it can work well with shurikens. But I think it kind of thrives the most with the other items in its slow, within this slow, sort of theme up here. So yeah, that's kind of covers a lot of the slow things. We can see, obviously a lot of these things work really well with some of Vanessa's current items, and then we have some, other funky ones here that work well as well. So obviously Jite, scaling our damage from slow, Clamora might give us a slightly quicker start. Mantis Shrimp, if we're already working off of slow, we can get some extra damage and burn in. And then we're thinking, let's say, like shock glasses for the most slow possible. Like if we get like shock glasses and something, like this is where we get our slow procs from. And then obviously we have some skills that work really well with it as well. We have our slow freeze, we have our budget trained, we have actual trained. Then we also have, you know, scaling crit off of slow procs and thick hide, which is just absolutely insane because on each slow proc we get to charge an item. So I think that covers kind of the slow area. We'll move across to haste. And, you know, while we're over here, we'll talk about the cauterizing blade. So obviously I've kind of got slow and haste here. And this works with both because we can choose. And like, obviously it has the scaling damage. Now cauterizing blade. So plus 10, 20, 30 at its respective level and plus 2, 4, 6 burn. So that's a slow or haste. And basically we get to choose. Now I personally think that it's better with haste because I love in the end game being able to use an item like holsters and getting a ton of value out of starting really, really quickly. But at the same time, it's still pretty good with slow as well. Yeah, so, you know, with this sort of item, obviously we're looking at things like shot glasses, we're looking at things like holsters, like Zoacid, like dive weights if we're doing haste stuff. And then, yeah, that's kind of all there is to it. Like, it's similar in theme. Like, we're just trying to dump a whole bunch of slow, or in this case, a whole bunch of, you know, haste. And obviously, you know, things like Living Flame, I just threw this in here as a skill high roll. We'll go over some of these skills as well. But obviously, there's a lot of burn items here, you know, and so this works well in that regard. Because obviously, when we fall below half health, we get to halve the cooldown of our burn items. So that's obviously a huge boon for us. Now, I just threw, I think, is this Mr. Richardson up here? I think his name is Mr. Richardson. Little guy. Obviously that works well with haste or slow. It just gives us a little bit of defense. That's kind of the slow and haste. Now it kind of blends into some of the other bits. Obviously, I just slapped these down here because obviously these are really useful. Improvised bludgeon, makeshift barricade, and rocket boots. If we want more haste or we want more slow, pretty self-explanatory. And then obviously we have things like rigged, which synergizes really well with Clamor if we're going for some haste stuff. Diamond Fangs, we have a lot of small items here, so Diamond Fangs are super valuable. More ammo is always good. And then we have Paralyzing Rush here, which is when we slow haste a weapon, which obviously works well. And then, you know, I've slapped these ones in the middle because these are just generally useful skills, like Reel 'em in, obviously a bit of a high roll, but when our enemy falls below half health, we halve the cooldown of our items. Obviously, it's a bit of a high roll. Then we just have some general crit stuff, you know, for some of the crit things that we do. And then we also have some, you know, actual useful, more useful things. Like we have some damage scaling, we have Bloodhound and crit scaling as well. And yeah, so that kind of covers the slow and haste portion of From the Shadows. Now we'll move on to, I guess we'll just cover the glider quickly. Now, glider, I haven't had a big opportunity to use yet, unfortunately, but it seems absolutely amazing. Because when we look at a lot of Vanessa's items, like we think like along the lines of something like Langshot, like Sniper Rifle, where we just want to kill them instantly off of one hit. You know, nothing happening to us until we use an item is kind of a key in that regard, right? And at Diamond, at 10 seconds, we can have a Lang at max 10-second cooldown, and it goes off no matter what. Now, obviously, you won't kill every time, but it's pretty damn amazing. And another synergy I wanted to talk about is with the Stealth Glider and the Shurikens. So I guess we can kind of pivot to Shurikens here. We know what Stealth Glider does. It gives us invulnerability for the first 8 or 10 seconds, depending on the level. But then if we think something like Shurikens and Orange Julian, these things have high cooldowns and we get a bunch of damage from it. So if we have an Orange Julian, maybe a Figurehead for some more damage or whatever, a Bayonet next to these, maybe a Hoverboard. These are just ways that we can multiply our damage on these Shurikens, by the way. And actually, I'll explain what the Shurikens do before we go any further. So what we do here is it has multicast equal to its ammo. And when we use it, we consume all of its ammo. So basically, when we think of what we want to do with something like this, we have maybe something like a cannonball. We think something like dive weights. It's similar in that regard, but we are trying to kill in one burst, similar to Lang but non-reusable. So obviously we want to stack the max amount of damage possible. So when we think about that, we think pistol sword, we're using an ammo item. We think the hoverboard here, which is part of the new expansion as well, which is when we use an adjacent item, we just deal damage. And then we have a bayonet, which is, the right side of a weapon as well. So we can stack all this damage on one item, which kind of just results in like this. It basically multiplies its damage by 4, if you think about it. And when we have an Orange Julian as well, if we can time it right and make the Orange Julian go off beforehand, which, with an 8-second cooldown, when we get Julian to the higher levels, that'll happen anyway. That's when it starts to get really funky, right? And we just dump a whole bunch of damage. And that's what I was talking about with the Stealth Glider is, if we theory craft a little bit here, we have an Orange Julian with a cooldown slightly below this, and then we have all of these items, but not the pistol sword because it has a cooldown. We stick you on board, and all of a sudden we have an item at 8 seconds that does, let's say we have 300 damage on our Julian, and this has a bunch of ammo on it. 6 times multicast, times that by 2, 3, and then 200 damage. Like all of a sudden we're getting a shit ton of damage. Now obviously this works well with a lot of just our regular damage skills, and I wanted to talk about this one down here quickly because this is our passive items gain 25 to 50%, depending on the level of the skill, more damage, heal, or shield. So when we think about bladed, I think it's bladed hoverboard, or it's just, what is it? Bladed hoverboard, yeah. Obviously when we use an adjacent item, we deal damage. When we have this, it complements the passiveness of that, basically. Now, in a more general sense, when we're using something like the bladed hoverboard, we'll pivot away from the shurikens now. We want nice, quick items next to it. So we think of something like katana, which effectively just doubles the damage of the katana because it's a nice, quick 2-second item. And then we can buff both of these items' damage with something like Figurehead to give us a bunch of burst damage at the start. What I love doing is I love having a Figurehead, I love having the hoverboard, I love having a bayonet on the other side of this katana here, and we basically just dump a whole bunch of damage, and maybe we have some complementary skills, but we already have a bunch of damage on board, so we don't always need it. Now, wetware is a little bit different. I think it feels a little bit out of place. Like I get where they're going with it, but it doesn't feel amazing. Obviously, it's only going to work in something like a wide weapons board or something that uses weapons really quickly because it scales off of weapon usage. Now, its scaling is good. When we use a weapon, this gains 20, 30, 40, 50 shield for the fight. Has an 8-second cooldown. However, if we have another tech item, we reduce its cooldown by 2 seconds. So what that essentially means is that we have a bunch of defense, but it's not really what we want to prioritize. If we're playing wide weapons, it might be good in the first couple of days when we're kind of running like a dynamic build and we haven't, fully focused on something, but it feels a little bit out of place. It's not going to get used in the late game generally, unless we have this super interesting synergy. It just feels not amazing. Like, if I'm running wide weapons, I want to run wide weapons. I don't really want a medium item that does shield, right? And then we have what I think is the item that I don't get the most, and it's the Cyber Psy. Now, the Cyber Psy are, when we first 1, 2, 3, 4 times we crit with this each fight, we take no damage for 1 second. I get it. Like, I understand what it does, but it just feels slightly janky to use. Like, I don't really think that it's phenomenal. Like, obviously, we want a bunch of crit. We know the synergies. We want inexonerable. We want weapons crit. We want, probably something like wide weapons or something like this. But it feels like survivability in a place where we don't necessarily need it, because on burst damage, like, we're just focusing on doing the most amount of damage possible, and if we're using something like shuriken, then it all goes at once, and then we don't really care about the invulnerability. So it just gets, I don't know, it feels a little bit lost. I don't think it's as good. So So let's just kind of go over some of these skills that I've thrown in here quickly and just talk about what they work with. We've talked about the slow skills. We've talked about Living Flame. We've talked about the damage skills. I've talked, obviously max ammo is pretty regular. We know what max ammo does. We know that it's good, right? Diamond Fangs, also obvious. Rigged, also obvious. But, maybe slightly more, useful in certain situations than others when we're thinking something like Cauterizing Blade. And then we have Neophiliac as well. We have Poison, Slow, Burn, Haste in a lot of these cases up the top here. So, we are, the charge is obviously useful. Talked about Paralyzing Rush. And then this is just a great general cooldown skill as well. Now, all of these, in saying all of this, there are obviously other skills, other items that work in these builds. But this was kind of a brief overview of some of the more key items, I'd say, and like the way that these builds work and what we want to focus on. Now, these builds are, they are, upgrade heavy, I think, and they rely on specific components, and it's hard to create like dynamic builds with them. And what I mean by that is when we're running something like a shuriken, what are we relying on? We want more ammo, we want more damage. And if we're running on Kusarigama, we want more slow, we want more crit. And we have to, we have to find something like a Probo or a nice quick weapon to put next to this that allows us to scale better, right? And, when we get shot glasses, which obviously works in some of these builds, we're trying to get more ammo for it. And Cauterizing Blade, we're trying to get more haste. Like, obviously, talking about the item's functions and saying, oh yeah, the item's functions, that's what we should be focusing on. True. But at the same time, there doesn't feel like there's a lot of room for flexibility, and the themes feel similar to what we've seen from Vanessa so far. There's a lot of haste, there's a lot of slow, there's a lot of crit, which is what she's about, right? She's about crit, she's about damage. But, things like Cauterizing Blade, it just feels like a bigger Mantis Shrimp. And then, let's say Oni Mask, it kind of feels similar. The slow burn charge, it's Lighthouse, it's Darkwater Anglefish. There's a lot of things that do similar stuff. I still think it was a great expansion. I think for me, if I had to say what the coolest item was, it'd probably be Stealth Glider. I love the idea of, slowing the game down in such a way that you just become unbeatable and at 10 seconds you just kill someone. It seems pretty funny to me. So that's kind of it. Kind of a more brief overview. I just wanted to do a quick little guide video, just a breakdown talking about some of the items from the new expansion. We're a significant portion through the season, so I thought that it would be, an appropriate time to talk about it after I've gotten to play it for a little while. And it's good. There's not really, it is really, really good. And Vanessa has been a really strong character this season. Obviously, it feels like Pig is on top at the moment, but Vanessa's definitely up there as well. Well, hey, like, subscribe, drop a comment down below. I really appreciate you guys watching through the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.